right, welcome back to No Kings on the Hill. I am Dr. Hill. Thanks for joining me tonight on episode 38, the Fauci Files. We are live every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Rumble, X, and Facebook at the Patriots Prayer Network, on YouTube and Facebook at No Kings on the Hill, and on X at Dr. Hill Law 42. Before we get into it, a quick favor. If this show helps you think more clearly about the Constitution, the courts, Congress, and the fights underneath the headlines, take a second to follow or subscribe wherever you listen. It helps more than people realize. Also, please don't forget to check out our website. You see scrolling across the bottom of the screen, No Kings on the Hill with drhilllaw.com. That is where you can access links to all of our social media accounts, previous episodes, and other ways to keep up with what's going on with the show. There you can subscribe for free and access our weekly blog. If you'd like to help us grow this platform, you can subscribe to one of our paid tiers that allows us to continue growing and gives you perks as a subscriber, including but not limited to guest hosting opportunities, subscriber-only live streams, Discord chats, and even a way in what we talk about next. And send this episode to someone who remembers being told that asking questions was dangerous. We do not grow by chasing outrage. We grow by doing the work, documents, institutions, accountability, and constitutional limits. For years, Americans were told that the COVID origin debate was settled enough for dissenters to be mocked, censored, or pushed to the margins. If you asked whether a lab accident was plausible, you were told to trust the experts. If you asked whether the U.S. funded research in Wuhan mattered, you were told the question was a conspiracy theory. If you asked whether powerful officials had conflicts of interest in shaping the public narrative, you were told that the people in charge had already checked. Now, the former director of national intelligence has released a new declassified packet on COVID-19 origins, Dr. Fauci, intelligence community communications, whistleblower allegations, congressional testimony, and the debate over gain-of-function research. ODNI's own release uses explosive language. It alleges that Fauci influenced intelligence assessments, that dissent was suppressed, that whistleblowers faced retaliation, and that Congress may not have been told the full truth. That does not mean every allegation is proven. It does not mean every document says what the headline says. It does mean we should replace one oversimplified narrative with another. But it does mean that the old... Hold on a second. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. Let me try and get my fan going. It's getting a little hot in here. All right. It does not mean we should replace one oversimplified narrative with another. But it does mean the old demand to stop asking questions and trust the people in charge has aged very badly. All right, so let's open the Fauci files. I'm going to get started with my monologue. After that, I will get into the segment one. When I get towards the end of segment one, I'll pull up a couple of the, at the beginning of segment one, and I'll pull up some documents, and then each segment will kind of go over the main portions or main segments of the documents that were released. Obviously, there's not enough time to fully cover the documents in this podcast because there's over 300 released new documents. So I will, in each segment, kind of give you an idea of what's in the documents, what was there, what isn't there, and then show some of those clips too. So let me grab a drink, and then I will get started with my monologue. Also, if you are new here, or if you're not new, please tap that screen wherever you're at, hit that like button, follow. Let's get this pushed out so more people can get in. Also, please engage in the comments, and so we can keep this going. And then, like I said, I will go ahead and get going through here. Let me know how everything's going, and please tap that screen, like, repost, share. Let's get some more people in here and get some discussions going. So now, the appropriate posture going into this episode is not, here's how you should think about it. The mistake we made with the public during COVID was declaring a verdict before we read the file. Government officials treated uncertainty like an enemy. They treated dissent like disinformation. They treated institutional reputation as more important than the truth. We shouldn't replicate that. We shouldn't say, oh, here's another document release, therefore every accusation we have heard is true. We should say, hold on, this document release raises credible questions. Questions deserve answers. And it's the job of investigators, whistleblowers, watchdogs, reporters, and politicians to demand those actual answers. So, okay, let's break this down so we don't fall into these traps. The ODNI released on June 18th is big. It's politically dynamite. Why? Well, for starters, this bomb drops at the intersection of three public faith failures. The first failure is our public health response. Americans accepted historic limitations on their daily lives. Closed schools, shut down businesses, closed churches, vaccine mandates, masking requirements, limited travel, it goes on. Expanded administrative state power during a pandemic, yes, but we should have expected follow-up questions, especially after officials raised similar concerns about the Chinese lab in Congress and never provided a full accounting. The second failure is our public information framework. Pressure from the government and big tech created an environment in which some COVID debates weren't fully discussed. They were treated like hearsay. You question mask effectiveness, dangerous speech. You suggest that the pandemic wasn't as serious as it was said to be, misinformation. Question the lockdown, disinformation. Don't live in the world I want you to live in, cancel. In hindsight, we should have seen this coming. It's not a function of politics, it's basic information theory. When dissenting voices are silenced, you don't get better information, you get information rot. Lastly, this release illuminates failure within our institutions of accountability. Congress tried to ask questions. The response was defensive, obfuscatory, incomplete, heavy on the jargon, which brings us to Dr. Fauci. Anthony Fauci is a big reason why we're having this conversation, not because he made public health decisions. Dozens of officials did that. We hold them all accountable. Fauci was the face of the pandemic. He ran NIAID. He influenced federal funding. Holy crap, did he even influence federal funding? He was treated as the embodiment of science by large portions of the press. So here's ODNI, the Director of National Intelligence, saying Fauci may have had a hand in shaping intelligence related to the origin of COVID, which could have involved research networks he funded or oversaw. This isn't about personal feelings. This is about conflicts, transparency, control of the government narrative. You can see why just by reading the document index, this is not a press release. And I'll go ahead and let me get up to that one. And this just document index right here, I'll go and bring that for now. But this is a packet of materials that includes an LLNL report titled COVID-19 Lab Modification Conditions Present at WIV, emails detailing Fauci's recommendation, a Fauci readout, congressional letter materials, contentious HPSCI briefing readouts, IC Whistleblower Protection Act compliant reading, false congressional testimony, and whistleblower letters. An email titled NIH now says WIV did GOF, the proximal origin paper, statements of work, cables about the Wuhan lab, congressional knowledge about gain of function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Was this information manipulated up or down? We don't know. Should we hold the people who may have manipulated accountable? Of course we should. But that is a separate question from basic congressional oversight. Does Congress know what's going on inside the agency it funds? Are whistleblowers and outsiders who challenge the public health orthodoxy allowed to share their views? It's impossible to answer those questions if the government controls the narrative. This episode shouldn't try to parse, we're not going to try to parse or debate every scientific claim within within an hour window. We will not settle viral psychogenics on this podcast, but there is a much better lane for this conversation to hover over the Constitution. In a republic, the people who serve in positions of power must answer questions. Expertise doesn't override congressional authority. National intelligence doesn't get to classify information to avoid embarrassment. And just because a topic is shrouded in scientific uncertainty doesn't mean critics can be censored. Nor does a public health emergency override the fundamental obligation officials have to tell Congress and the people truthfully what they know. We see this idea baked into the First and Fourth Amendments, but nowhere is it more pertinent than in the separation of powers. No kings on the hill means exactly what it sounds like. You don't get to be a king. Kings get to say, do what I say because I'm the king. Well, bureaucracies can do the same thing. They just use a different language. Here's how that speech sounds. The science is too complicated for the masses to understand. The people raising these questions aren't responsible. The documents I'm citing are classified. Plus, all the scientists agree with me. Case closed. But here's the thing about constitutional government. It runs on the exact opposite philosophy. The people are king. Congress can demand answers. Whistleblowers have statutes they can utilize. And if elected officials shape the narrative about what our government knew about the Wuhan lab while concealing conflicts of interest, the public deserves to know. The other important thing about this release is that it forces conservatives to be precise in our thinking. The most potent argument is that not that Fauci did X, Y, and Z, which means everything we had heard was a lie. The most potent argument is the following. A small group of powerful officials potentially had both the means and motivation to direct the national conversation away from theories about the pandemic that challenged their own decisions. Meanwhile, the institutions that were supposed to provide checks and balances may have facilitated the prevailing narrative. We don't know that to be true. What we do know is that it's a governance problem. It's also a constitutional problem if Congress cannot perform its constitutionally mandated duty of oversight because executive branch officials, intelligence analysts can take disputed judgments and funnel them through institutional bottlenecks until they become uncontested groupthink. So how do we talk about this? I would frame this entire episode around the concept of narrative laundering. Now, what is narrative laundering? Think of it like washing dirty money at a laundromat. Just as money that's come from shady sources can be run through legitimate businesses until it looks clean and respectable, a questionable idea or claim can be passed through several layers of institutions, experts, and media until it comes out looking like a settled fact. The original source gets obscured, but what reaches the public seems polished and trustworthy. It is when a disprovable or disputable claim passes through various layers of powerful institutions until it emerges on the other side as though it were neutral colored money. A scientist of government official makes recommendations to intelligence analysts. Intelligence analysts cite expert input when drafting reports. Public officials cite intelligence. Media outlets cite the government as apparently in consensus. Big tech cites the experts to crack down on certain viewpoints. When you're finished this cycle, the public believes they're reading a newspaper story with a full story tall firewall of expertise behind it. It originated from a small group of people talking to each other. To be clear, we have to maintain caution as we talk about this. We do not want the document shown based on the index alone. Part of this ODNI document is written and prosecuting people in court form. The implication is that Fauci lied to Congress. Dr. Fauci has said that it is not true. He has previously called accusation of a COVID cover-up preposterous. Another fact that hasn't changed, none of the three major intelligence agencies has reached a definitive public conclusion about the origins of COVID. So skepticism, good skepticism about the previous narrative, healthy skepticism about institutions acting in ways that protect themselves. But healthy skepticism about new information that exceeds what the evidence shows. What was released is Fauci's relationship with intelligence, oversight questions based on congressional testimony, whistleblowers matter. What we know and don't know about the broader constitutional principle is just because we must trust experts in science doesn't mean we should trust the government to use that science however it wants without oversight, transparency, and accountability. So that's the end of my monologue. To get started with segment one here in a second will be what was released and why it matters, which I will get to that. I got to switch my... Let me make sure I've got this correct really fast. Make sure that was okay. So yeah, that was the one I thought it was. All right, so segment one, yeah, part one, page 1 through 4. All right, so this is the one, but I need to go back. Well, no, that's not the one. Add the stage. There we go. I need to get from slide 26, go back to slide 1 through 4, and then 26 is on the next page. All right, so let me get started here on segment one. So on June 18th of this year, 2026, ODNI released a document set about COVID-19 entitled Fauci Founded Wuhan Lab Research That Sparked COVID. That's not a subtitle. ODNI's press release explains that the materials released included correspondence and documents detailing Fauci's interactions with the intelligence community, U.S. government-funded research linked to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, intelligence community assessments regarding the origins of COVID-19, whistleblower complaints, and testimony before Congress. The headline and the document packet are two different things. The government press release is a statement about a set of documents. The documents are the evidence. Good reporting keeps those two separate. We can report what ODNI is alleging, but we can also ask what evidence in the packet supports those allegations, what information is still in dispute, and what questions Congress needs to follow up on. First, let's start with the best place to understand what is in the document which is the index. All right. Number one is an LLNL International Assessments report called COVID-19 Lab Modification Conditions Present at WIV, which is what I had up here on this part. All right. So as we can see, it covers a couple different things on it, and it does not necessarily eliminate the ability for there to have been a for the coronavirus to have happened due to laboratory modifications. We assess all of the necessary conditions for an accidental release of a laboratory modified coronavirus, specifically a coronavirus adapted to recognize human cell receptors, were present at the Chinese Wuhan Institute of Virology in mid to late 2019. As a result, we place equal weight on the hypotheses that the COVID-19 virus was a result of laboratory modification along with that of a natural outbreak or the release from a laboratory of a naturally occurring virus. It shows us that either or could be the case. The hypothesis doesn't give you an answer on which one it was, but it does show that Wuhan had the modified virus there and that it could have possibly leaked out. So then let me go back to the title. So number 2 is the agenda from an expert meeting on data needs to assess the possibility of lab origin of 2019 NCOV from February 2020. Number 3 is technical research articles on synthetic assembly and recombinant bat SARS-like coronaviruses. Immediately, we know that this packet isn't just a bunch of partisan emails. It contains internal scientific research and intelligence community adjacent material discussing the plausibility of lab modifications as an origin scenario. Then we get to items on the Fauci and intelligence community trail. Number 9 is an email chain about a July 21 email regarding the origins of COVID and recommendations from Dr. Fauci. Number 10 is called a Fauci readout. Number 11 is an email discussing Fauci pushing the CIA on COVID origins. Number 12 is a letter from congressional Republicans to HHS. 17 and 18 are readouts of highly contentious congressional briefings on COVID origins. Number 19 is an email regarding a brief into the COVID subcommittee. All of those items point to the central question in this episode. How involved was Dr. Fauci in directing or influencing the intelligence community's work related to the origins of COVID? Oh, and did I mention the index has the whistleblower trail too? Item 32 is titled email titled ICWPA complaint. False testimony to Congress from August 21st. Item 33 discusses a whistleblower issue. Number 34 and 35 are letters revised following transcript review. Number 36 and 37 are HPSCI or SSCI whistleblower transmittal letters. Did you realize how many whistleblower documents there are in this packet? I mean, keep listening. I've only explained why they're interesting. Now, what happened when whistleblowers raised concerns internally when they spoke up about things they knew from inside the system? How were they treated? Item 32 alleges somebody lied to Congress. Other items show the system, how those people, witnesses who raised concerns, were handled within HPSCI and the whistleblower system. Lastly, the index includes many of the familiar public-facing documents we will discuss on this episode. Item 38 is the NIH director's blog post stating genomic evidence points to a natural origin. Item 39 is the proximal origin publication. Items 40 and 41 are cables regarding China's lab in Wuhan. Immediately, we know this packet includes a discussion about what the public was told. We know agency leaders and the FBI, what had been concluded internally and what was said publicly. Was there a discrepancy? Who were the experts being quoted to the public? The more we understand how the possibilities for the COVID origin were framed for the public, the better we can assess what was elevated and what was cast as outlandish. For example, was lab modification treated as a credible possibility internally, but not mentioned in public materials? Or was it treated as exceedingly unlikely by officials? Why does any of this matter right now? The COVID origins controversy isn't over because it's boring or because we need to move on as a country. The COVID origins controversy will determine whether the next crisis is managed by a consent or by force. If people perceive that public officials hid conflicts of interest, silenced dissenters, or twisted intelligence to fit conclusions, that every time let me see, why is it not doing my, okay. Oh, it's because I still have that up there. Let me remove it. All right, there we go. Dissenters are twisted intelligence to fit conclusions. Then every time follow the science request will be filtered through those suspicions. You cannot govern a constitutional republic by burning through the people's trust. The quickest way to make your case that this is important is to say, do you not care about any of those science debates? ODNI doesn't think you have to care about that today to care about this document release. Instead, they want us to reopen the conversation about accountability. What did Joe Biden and Dr. Fauci know when they separated from the intelligence community's assessment? What did Collins know? Were conflicts disclosed? Who briefed Congress? Who briefed Congress accurately? Did anyone protect whistleblowers? Did anyone retaliate against whistleblowers? That's not claiming scientific conclusions. Those are straightforward accountability questions, and they should be answered. Something to end this segment on, though, obviously, is the guardrail that we're seeing in this episode. And that is, in presenting all this to you, I'm not saying every document in this packet proves what ODNI press header claims. I am saying there is enough here to spend an entire episode digging into it, and Congress needs to follow up. The question is not whether you trust Fauci or distrust Fauci. The question is whether power answered questions honestly. And honestly, I could probably do 2 or 3 episodes covering all the stuff in here, because there's over almost 1,000 total documents between the 4 different PDF files. Close to 1,000 pages between all the PDF files to go through. So there's not even a way to go through all of it in an hour-long episode. So I'm going to try to cover the main parts of it and what changes from what we saw before, and cover that. And then I will go over the rest from there. What is going on with, all right, there we go. I was just trying to make sure I got everything up. Let me get this a little bit higher. I've got an Excel page over here to show exactly which PDFs for each segment, so I can make sure I'm going to the right page and stuff. Alrighty, let's get on to segment 2. I don't see any comments or anything yet. Please engage in the comments if you have any questions, want to know any specific, or want me to cover any specific things, or read through any specific pages in the documents. Let me know through the comments there. And also, like I said, please engage, like, repost, share. Let's try to get the views up and get YouTube and the algorithms to push this out more so we can see it. What is it? That's not what I wanted. There, wrong button. Oops. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to get started with segment 2, Fauci, intelligence, and narrative laundering. All right, so the central story is not simply that Dr. Fauci had conversations with intelligence officials and a crisis subject matter experts talk to government agencies. That is normal. The problem arises if the expert has an institutional interest in the answer, if the expert's preferred narrative is treated as neutral analysis, and if dissenting expert views are excluded or punished. ODNI's release alleges that Fauci became a behind-the-scenes advisor to the intelligence community on COVID origins, supplied or recommended experts, and helped steer assessments toward a natural origin narrative. Again, that is the allegation. The constitutional question is, what checks existed? Did analysts know the funding and institutional history? Were alternative experts invited? Were conflicts disclosed? Did decision makers separate scientific uncertainty from institutional self-protection? This is where narrative laundering is useful. Imagine a contested origin theory. One path says a virus moved naturally from animals to humans. Another says a lab accident is plausible, especially given the location of the outbreak and the kind of research underway in Wuhan. In a healthy process, analysts test both theories, invite generally competing expertise, disclose uncertainty, and let conclusions remain provisional. In an unhealthy process, a preferred expert circle helps define what counts as credible. Intelligence incorporates that circle's view, and public officials cite intelligence. Media outlets present the result as a consensus. That process can create authority without accountability. The public hears the intelligence community says, or the scientists say, but the actual claim may be much narrower. One set of officials, one set of experts, one set of incentives, one set of exclusions. This is not science, that is institutional echo. The Fauci angle intensifies the concerns because NIAID funded research and the broader U.S. funded research ecosystems were part of the public debate. If a lab-related origin would raise questions about grants, oversight, gain-of-function definitions, biosafety, and federal funding decisions, then officials connected to that ecosystem should not be allowed to quietly dominate the assessment of whether a lab-related origin is plausible. A conservative constitutional lens should focus on incentives. Human beings protect institutions, agencies protect budgets, and officials protect reputations. Intelligence officials protect sources and methods, but also sometimes protect analytic judgments from embarrassment. Scientists protect their fields. Media outlets protect narratives they invested in. None of that requires a comic book conspiracy. It is enough that powerful institutions tend to defend themselves when the cost of admission is admitting they may have been wrong. The release also revives the question of the proximal origin paper and similar public-facing interventions. That paper was used for years to argue against claims about lab origin. It's included in the document index. The point of the episode is not to parse every scientific claim in the paper, but to ask how quickly a contested expert judgment became a public cudgel. Who encouraged it, who cited it, who treated it as final, and who benefited from the public's belief that the question was closed. That is the same pattern we have seen in our institutional failures. During surveillance fights, officials say classification prevents a full explanation. During administrative state fights, agencies argued that technical expertise warrants deference. During public health emergencies, officials say that speed and expertise require compliance. In each case, the constitutional danger is not expertise itself. The danger is expertise fused with unreviewable power. To be fair, there is a need for expert input. Intelligence analysts are not virologists. They need scientists, obviously. But officials are not laboratory specialists. They need technical advice. But expert input becomes dangerous when it is treated as the end of inquiry rather than the beginning. The right question is not, did Fauci speak to the intelligence community? The right question is, did his role help illuminate the truth, or did it narrow the range of permissible conclusions? There is also a media lesson. If the same circle influences government assessment and then media outlets cite that assessment to marginalize dissent, the public debate is being managed. Maybe the managers believe they are protecting the truth. Maybe they believe they are preventing panic. Maybe they believe dissenters are irresponsible, but that is exactly why the First Amendment exists. The public does not belong to expert managers. The public belongs to itself. The strongest soundbite is that the problem is not that experts advise the government. The problem is when expert advice becomes a shield against oversight, a weapon against dissent, and a substitute for proof. All right, so now I'll cover some of the documents here in section 1 that I was going to, segment 2 that I was going to cover. So let me get to, let's see, which was it, 23? Was that the one? I think it's the next 24. Yeah, I think it was 24. I've got it pulled up on, okay, it was actually, yeah, I'm trying to see where I had them pulled up on my paper. I'm just trying to make sure where I got it. All right, that was 26. Yeah, okay, so it is document 26. All right. So this one goes, no one should expect the Chinese Communist Party to cooperate with a real inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. More disappointing is the lack of candor from American scientists and officials who conflicts of interest deserve more scrutiny. More than a year and a half after Chinese researchers published a draft genome of COVID-19, the world still doesn't know where the virus came from. The leading theories are an accidental lab leak or zoonotic spillover from a bat or other intermediary species. The World Health Organization team visited Wuhan this year, but Chinese officials provided little useful information. Even WHO Director General Tedros, typically a Chinese ally, criticized Beijing for a lack of transparency. He called for an audit of laboratories in Wuhan as part of the origin investigation's next phase, but Beijing rejected the idea. A senior Chinese public official said WHO's plan did not respect common sense and violated science. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has called instead for an investigation into Fort Detrick, a U.S. military lab. The Wuhan Institute of Virology official said that his lab did not contract, preserve, or study the novel coronavirus, and it never designed, made, or leaked the virus. According to the Chinese state media, he added that there have been 0 pathogen leaks, which, of course, Chinese is going to say that, and they're going to try to blame it on America. But that doesn't surprise me. So it goes, Mr. Dzik, Dr. Fauci, and all researchers involved in gain-of-function research who suffer significant reputational damage and perhaps lose funding if scientific which I'm trying to see which page I'm on, 27. All right. Scientific research they supported caused the pandemic. On Sunday, Dr. Fauci said the research cooperation was necessary because SARS-CoV-1 originated in China, but exactly what did that cooperation yield? Congress should thoroughly investigate the process that led to the approval of money for the WIV and possible gain-of-function research. It should also debate limits on this kind of research in the U.S. and push for international standards. While China is unlikely to budge, its opacity has aroused justifiable suspicion around the world, and the White House should keep the pressure on Beijing and the WHO. Democrats and much of the media will avoid the topic because Mr. Paul and the populist right have taken up this cause. Such groupthink is what prevented the lab leak theory from being treated seriously for more than a year. Making that same mistake twice is inexcusable. That's kind of what this page goes through. And then let me cover another pages. Is that document 25, possible reviewers for COVID. Document 7. So this is going over all the studies. I'm trying to. Okay, that's not what I was trying to think. All right, so synthetic biology is newly developed. Let me go to change this real quick. I'm trying to go through it a couple different pages that it's talking about, but it's a little hard to cover all of it. So this just about assembly of long DNA sequences using a new synthetic cola yeast shuttle vector. I'm not going to get into all the science and virology studies because this isn't a science. I'm not a scientist, so this is a lot of different instances there. I'm trying to figure out, actually, that was supposed to be part 2. Let me go to part 2 here. All right, so segment 2. It's part 1 and part 2. All right, but I'm going to look at this anyways. So this is upon removal of attachments. This document is unclassified. This is attached. Please find the whistleblower complaint and underlying documentation we discussed during our last monthly meeting, which I'm going to go into this one in a minute because that's too far into it, because that's covered in the next segment. I'm trying to find. Okay, so document 7, Fauci readout. That's the study. That's just Science, Engineering, Medicine, National Academies. That numbered document is not right. LLNL, International Assessment Report, COVID Origins, Dr. Fauci Recommendations, document 6, but I think it's talking about the actual documents in here. Okay, so for those who don't, this one talks about more of classifications. The article that Dr. Fauci highlighted last week is attached, and the authors whose views he thought were particularly important were blah, 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 which they all still have classified as discussed. It might be worth considering the article and talking with these individuals in connection with the 90-day study. In addition, the COVID report rollout is scheduled to be discussed on Friday at the IC Weekly. Please provide any materials or information you want the DNI to convey NLT Thursday. So, and this just keeps on going through more of the papers. Like I said, there's over 94 pages just on this right here. Once you get through this, both of these studies, there's over 94 pages in this set. And then I've got 4 other sets to go through. So I'm going to go ahead and get to segment 3, which is Congress testimony and the duty to tell the truth. So the third question then returns to Congress. The ODNI release accuses Fauci's 2024 testimony to Congress of being contradicted by the emails it released. Fauci was asked by House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic Chair James Clyburn, Democrat, South Carolina, if he had communicated with intelligence agencies about gain-of-function research before, during, or after the pandemic. The claim is that his answer omitted the newly revealed record. A false statement or perjury-type question turns on the precise question that was asked. The perceived answer given, what the witness knew materially, intent, and other facts in the transcript. If a government official provides Congress with an answer that falsely minimizes contacts with the Intelligence Committee, that is a serious accountability problem, whether or not a crime was committed. Congressional oversight isn't theater. At least it shouldn't be. The legislative branch funds agencies, writes statutes, investigates executive branch actions, and educates the public. Within our constitutional framework, those are congressional powers. When a current or former official testifies before Congress, they aren't doing Congress a favor. Congress is exercising its constitutional responsibility to the American people. Witnesses have an obligation to be clear and truthful. Evasive testimony corrupts that responsibility. If a witness can survive by answering one version of a question, but not the practical truth of it, Congress can't fully reconstruct what happened. If officials can hide behind classifications, I don't recall thin technical definitions or selectively parsed phrases, then congressional oversight is just theater. The public watches a hearing, but the government does not actually get held accountable. Weaponized definitions are another thread we can connect to here. A debate over gain of function research was held in large part on very granular definitions. Did certain work qualify as gain of function under NIH definitions, under grant terms, under what agency guidance is? The public conversation often evolved into arguing over these phrases. Those on one side of the debate used gain of function in a common sense way, experiments that increase a pathogen's danger, transmissibility, or infectiousness. Officials and agencies sometimes use narrow definitions when the topic turned technical. This created space for both sides to talk past each other. It also allowed officials to avoid responsibility by using terms the public did not always understand. The right question for Congress to ask is yes or no. Did this work meet your narrow technical definition of gain of function research? But also, did American taxpayers fund research that made viruses more dangerous? Did officials know, and did they disclose what they knew? Did they consider biosafety risks? Did they speak plainly with Congress and the public? Did they game phrases to obfuscate and avoid accountability? Articles of impeachment aren't the only way to enforce accountability in government. Connecting to Article 1 rights should be a big theme of what the segment I'm covering here, because Congress holds the power of the purse. Congress authorizes agencies to do their work. Congress has the power and responsibility to investigate how taxpayer dollars are spent. If Congress can't get straight answers about whether American taxpayer dollars were used for risky research in Wuhan, then Congress is not properly exercising its Article 1 powers. There's also a pardon or future accountability angle that should public reporting go there, but regulate its secondary status until we hear current, more comfortable facts that indicate it should be moved to the primary. The question isn't really about whether one person will be prosecuted. The question is whether our government has any way of learning from a once-in-a-century institutional failure. We can use criminal law as just one example of the tools Congress has at its disposal. Congress can make referrals to the Inspector General or law enforcement. They can launch their own investigations, hold public hearings, and write public reports. They can restrict funding, pass statutory reforms, mandate declassification, and strengthen whistleblower rights. The public can't begin to know what questions to ask about pandemic response policies if the government hides the pandemic origin story, hides the funding story, and punishes or silences internal dissent. And that's kind of where we get with all of this stuff. So I'm going to go, go to 2, and then let me get to the pages on this one for segment 3, and I'll read some of the emails. All right, let me get it. Where's my summary on this? I asked a question on where'd all my summaries go to? All right, maybe I didn't get that one done. All right, that one has summary on. I guess that one I didn't have it pull it. All right, so page 44 and following. All right, sorry, I was trying to get all this pulled together really quick, but it was a little tricky to get it all. So, all right, those are part 2. ICWA complaint, false testimony to Congress, document 32, document 36. All right. Let me see if I can find which question I ask here. So I'm going to try to get it to ask summarize and find it for me real quick. All right, let me see if I can find the ICWA complaint is what I'm trying to get it to pull up. Using the AI assistant on the Adobe to pull out exactly which document. Okay, so then it wasn't on this one, it's on the other document. All right. It's got to be on this set then. Okay, it's got to be on this page for the ICWA complaint. All right, that's what I got. All right. So that is the third one here. Let me get to it. All right. So that is page 40. That's okay. I did get on the right slide. All right. So on this one, as it reads, attached, please find the whistleblower complaint and underlying documentation we discussed during our last monthly meeting. The complaint alleges Dr. Fauci provided false testimony to Congress related to the conduct of gain-of-function research at the National Institutes of Health, thereby misleading the American people in congressional oversight. We determined this complaint does not meet the urgent concern standard because the allegedly false statement was made by a non-IC official and it pertains to an activity that the ICIG has no reason to believe is related to an intelligence activity or has a direct impact on any IC element, personnel, or capability. As such, we are not required to transmit this matter to you, but do so in the interest of keeping you fully informed. The statute, as interpreted by the September 3rd, 2019 OLC opinion, does not require you to transmit this matter to the Congressional Intelligence Committee. During our meeting, we discussed referring this complaint to the HHS OIG. My team and I considered this option and determined that given the anonymous nature of the submitter rendering us unable to follow up to obtain additional information and the classification levels of the underlying information forming the basis of the submission, we are very limited in what information we can share with HHS OIG. Additionally, the general dispute about gain-of-function research is already in the public domain, making it highly probable that the HHS OIG would already be aware of the allegation that Dr. Fauci's assessment is inaccurate. I am available to discuss, blah, blah, blah. That goes to the next page. And that kind of shows that they just pretty much ignored it. I mean, they didn't even pay attention to it. And NIH now says WIV did gain a function. So let me find that. So, okay, NIH, WIV. All right, let me go to the where it's at, where the NIH, I'm trying to remember exactly which page that was on. Okay, that was all in the one letter. All right. All right, I'm gonna get the NIH letter to Congress. All right, so that is page 50, that's slide 54. Let me get to 54 here. All right, so one person who might know what really happened to Wuhan. Too many questions are still unanswered about the origins of the pandemic. Though China's doors remain closed, there are significant and promising avenues for investigation in the United States. The two major hypotheses for the virus origins are zoonotic spillover from an animal to human, perhaps with an intermediate host, or that it leaked or escaped from a laboratory accident in Wuhan. The Wuhan Institute of Virology is one of the world's major centers of study of bat coronaviruses and was developing genetically modified variants able to infect human lung cells. Zoonotic spillover is a plausible explanation based on historical experience, and scientists should pursue it vigorously, but similar efforts must be made to discover whether a laboratory release or infection led to the pandemic. Peter Daszak, the president of EcoHealth Alliance, a nonprofit based in New York, organized a 5-year research program funded by the U.S. National Institute of Health to study bat coronavirus and potential spillover risk to people. With significant participation, the WIV and its scientists, Shine Zhang Li, the government of China, Ms. Xi, and Mr. Daszak all insist the laboratory could not be the source of the pandemic strain. Mr. Daszak has been particularly aggressive in promoting the zoonotic spillover hypothesis and attacking the laboratory leak as a conspiracy theory. Last week, it was disclosed that the EcoHealth Alliance in August filed a report on its research in 2018-2019. The report was 2 years late. This just happens to be the 2-year period of the pandemic and intense debate about the virus origins. No reason has been given. Mr. Daszak did not respond to our query. The tardy report describes experiments approved in advance by the NIH to test the infectivity of the genetically manipulated viruses on mice with cells resembling those of the human respiratory system. The manipulations made the virus more lethal to the mice. Although the NIH continues to insist this did not fit the definition of gain-of-function research and could not have led to the pandemic strain, it certainly should have met the U.S. government's own requirements for stricter oversight. Still, much is unknown. There is no direct evidence of zoonotic spillover nor a laboratory leak. But unanswered questions keep emerging about Dr. Daszak and the WIV. He was at the center of the public debate over the virus origins the only American appointed to the joint World Health Organization China mission. Why did he not disclose his 2018 proposal to the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, for research on bat coronavirus with the WIV and others, which called for engineering a modification onto spike proteins of seminaric viruses that would make them infect human cells in the way the pandemic strain did? I mean, that just makes you kind of question where, I mean, this is pretty damning. And we know DARPA loves to hide their shit. We know they love to hide anything they do. So then it goes, how does he know about the databases of viruses WIV took offline in 2019 and never brought back? Does he know what research WIV may have done on its own during or after their collaboration? What was being done at WIV in the months before the pandemic? Mr. Daszak must answer these questions before Congress. His grants were federal funds, and it's entirely appropriate for Congress to insist on accountability and transparency. He might also help the world understand what really happened in Wuhan. And notice in there that they said it on this that nobody really has figured out that what the truth is behind this. There's never been there's no way to prove that it was a zoonotic spillover. So why was Biden and the left being so adamant against something that could have been the lab leak? Which is why I can't even do this I can even stream this on TikTok tonight. I tried to post my my promo video, which didn't even just mention the topics I was going to discuss in their community guideline, and shut it down. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're not saying that you should have ignored it or it should never be done, but we should be able to trust our government and know what happened. We should know how this virus became, because we shouldn't be doing those to viruses, because the next virus may not get as overblown as the next one. Might actually be more a true pandemic and a true deadly virus that could wipe out half the world's population, but nobody believes it because how bad they said that COVID-19 was going to be, and then how bad it really wasn't. I mean, I know we lost over 1 million people, but we lose more than that every year from the common flu. So in reality, it was not worse than what we have every year. I mean, the COVID-19 is still around today, but you don't hear about it every year because it's just a normal sickness now. But the next one may not be. And people may not trust them because of what happens. That's what happened here, which is why we have to know the truth. Whistleblowers, dissent, and the cost of challenging consensus. So the whistleblower material may be the most significant part of the release because it shows how the system treated dissent from within. According to ODNI's press release, whistleblowers from multiple IC elements reported retaliation against colleagues who pushed back on the COVID origin. Conclusion. The release described allegations from whistleblowers who say a contractor was fired after coming forward. Analysts who supported the lab leak theory were told there would be career consequences, and senior leaders obstructed the whistleblowing complaint process. These are allegations that deserve investigation, but as constitutional matter, they are serious indeed. If intelligence analysts believed the lab leak theory was still plausible, but feared professional discipline for raising that view, the assessment issued for public consumption may not have included the full analytical record. It may have only included information that career professionals felt comfortable sharing. This matters because dissent is supposed to be part of intelligence work. It is not some kind of annoying extra we can learn too much of on when everything else fails. Dissent is what tests our assumptions. Dissenters challenge the consensus. Dissent flags when we don't know something. Anyone who has studied the history of intelligence failures knows the story tends to repeat itself when dissent is squashed. Time and time again, some low-level analysts raised questionable views that were buried by more experienced officials, only to see those wild theories confirmed by later events. A system that silences dissent isn't stronger, it's weaker. The link between the pandemic and public discourse is already well established. Many scientists, doctors, journalists, and citizens outside government got punished socially for asking questions. Some lost followers on social media. I mean, we still can't speak about COVID-19 on TikTok. Some lost their jobs. Some had their character attacked as if they were inherently dangerous to society. Some were implicitly or explicitly told that even discussing the lab origin was xenophobic or conspiracy-like. And if dissenting views were squelched inside government, then calling out public figures was not just bad moderation. It was part of a broader culture that enforced consensus at all costs. The No Kings angle here is simple. No one, whether they be an official, an agency, or an entire credentialed class of experts, is above questioning. If the position your government has taken is correct, then it should be able to survive some scrutiny. If it cannot survive some scrutiny, then the public should know what's happening and why. Whistleblower protections exist for a reason. Institutions equipped with legal teams and resources they can use to extract retaliation. That's just reality. We do not create protections for whistleblowers because bureaucracies are inherently humble organizations eager to embarrass themselves. We protect whistleblowers because at some point the public good necessarily outweighs powerful institutions' desire to protect themselves. Congress should ask how this process worked. Who chose which analysts were called upon to brief Congress? Who chose which experts outside government were consulted about origins? Were views recorded that differed from the consensus? Was the lab leak hypothesis presented with its strongest evidence or its weakest caricature? Did anyone instruct the analyst to reach a particular conclusion? Did senior officials bully their way to a consensus? Did anyone experience negative career consequences for pushing back on the consensus? Were whistleblower complaints properly investigated? In another article, we can explain fully why allegations of whistleblower retaliation matter to public trust, even if all the facts haven't been established. If reporters and the public see credible evidence that internal dissent was met with punishment, then officials issuing that consensus lose their moral authority to demand its acceptance. Consensus achieved through fear isn't consensus, it's obedience. The question isn't whether every analyst who dissented was right. The question is whether your government was serious about allowing them to dissent. That is the constitutional issue at stake, because dissent is what makes our government great. Dissent is what gives us the ability to have everything, and it's how we learn. I mean, there's, like they were talking about the dissent, I mean, there's so many different areas where dissent is proven that if you look at 2001, September 11th, 2001, if people had listened to the lower guys and not been so bad about dissent, we could have been more covered onto it. See respondents. All right, trying to see where it doesn't really say. Oh, PDF page 78, part 1. Let me see if this is. I'm trying to look at trying to find this other page real quick. Okay, so. All right, let me see this. I don't know exactly what this one was, but all right, that's another one. This is just how they attacked people. That's kind of an attack one. It has to do with the study on other stuff. So, all right, I'm going to do this one. This kind of just shows how they go and attack the how they attack people on it, and different experts or different people on the stories and how they go after it. All right, so start with 78 there, and then I'll change to it. But we go, Steve Bannon is behind bogus study that China created COVID. The study goes against basically all scientific evidence and expert opinion, but it fits with the former Trump advisor's anti-China posture. Adam Ronsley, Lachlan Markay, updated September 15, 2020, published a new study purporting to show that the novel coronavirus was manufactured in a Chinese lab, was published by a pair of nonprofit groups linked to Steve Bannon, the former top Trump strategist now facing felony fraud charges. The study, co-authored by a Chinese virologist who fled Hong Kong this year, claims that laboratory manipulation is part of the history of SARS-CoV-2. Its findings were quickly picked up by a handful of prominent news organizations, such as the New York Post, with hyped the explosive allegations that run counter to virtually all existing scientific literature on the source of the virus. The study is the work of the Rule of Law Society and the Rule of Law Foundation, sister nonprofit organizations that Bannon was instrumental in creating. According to documents posted on the Society's website last year, the served as the group's chair. The Bannon connection was first spotted by Carl, which it doesn't matter who owns the nonprofits. That doesn't make science fake. A search of Google Scholar and the Rule of Law Society and the Rule of Law Foundation website indicates that the organizations have not previously published scientific or medical research, and it's unclear whether the paper received any peer review. While an accidental, I gotta change the next page. Sorry. Here we go. I was reading, and it goes, while an accidental leak from the virology lab in Wuhan remains a theoretical possible source of the initial outbreak in the city, the virus was not man-made. The paper leads with a claim that the coronavirus genes are suspiciously similar to that of a bat coronavirus discovered by military laboratories in China. An assertion Rasmussen says that shouldn't be surprising because they are related SARS-like coronaviruses. The study's authors made a similar claim about a portion of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein which viruses use to breach and infect cells, and wrote that it's similar to the original SARS virus in a suspicious manner and suggests that genetic manipulation. SARS-CoV also used as a cell receptor, as do other SARS-like bat coronaviruses. Rasmussen says it is not suspicious and is in fact expected that the receptor binding domains that bind the same protein would be similar. In August, Jan appeared on Bannon's podcast. During that show, Bannon said that he was still not in the camp that believes they purposely let it out, but I've been strongly in the camp from the beginning that it came out of the Wuhan lab. No, go. Sorry, guys. My little one came in there for a second. But yeah, so, I mean, this goes one, but there's a whole lot more in there specific on the different emails and the whistleblower complaints and everything. I wish I had time to go through all these papers, but I really don't. So I am going to get through to go to page. I'm going to go to segment 5 and then keep going, and just give me a second. All right, so segment 5, what this does and does not prove. First, the release proves that this COVID origin accountability storyline is not over, period. That's important all by itself. You were told for years that the debate had been settled enough that dissent should be marginalized. One disclosure DOJ may never recover from was a 67-item declassified packet released by ODNI showing this story is very much alive inside the government. Internal records, intelligence community communications, whistleblower allegations, congressional oversight, disagreements. Second, the release proves that Fauci's involvement in the origins conversation was not just public-facing. The documents include records of communications and recommendations regarding intelligence work per ODNI. The attached indexes include Dr. Fauci's recommendations and a Fauci readout document index. That warrants follow-up questions about influence peddling, conflicts of interest, and the rigor of intelligence analysis. Third, the release bolster calls for further inquiry into testimony and congressional oversight. The index includes an ICWPA complaint filed in connection with false testimony to Congress and whistleblower letters submitted after reviewing transcripts. Does not necessarily prove a criminal matter, but does prove Congress needs to follow up. All right, so fourth, the release bolsters arguments for maximum declassification, transparency going forward. If more of this had been, hold on a second. Sorry about that. So if more of this had been available to the public and scientists for review years ago, we might have had a much healthier debate right now. The government should not wait years to release information that impacts public acceptance of emergency powers and deference to scientific authority. Now, what does it not prove? It does not prove by itself that where exactly SARS-CoV-2 came from. According to public reporting, U.S. intelligence agencies have not yet met and reached a single conclusive public answer. The U.S. intelligence community has not reached a consensus on a single definitive conclusion that we can share publicly. Reuters quoted an official saying, Senator Rick Scott asked for an update because some agencies lean toward lab-related findings while others lean toward natural origin findings or were inconclusive at different levels of confidence. None of these documents disproves uncertainty about the origins of COVID. They will certainly change the nature of the debate. But you'll still hear some people say it could have happened this way or that way. It does not prove every fact stated in ODNI's press release when only reading the index. The White House did it. The release headline is not a trial verdict. All right. It's just not. It does not prove that all pandemic precautions were invalid. It does not prove COVID came from a lab, but that does not mean every lockdown measure was pointless. Holding the government accountable for origins is not the same thing as videos telling you COVID wasn't deadly. Millions of people died around the world. This isn't about whether COVID was serious or not. It's about whether desperate times stop being the perfect moment for honesty. It does not prove science is bad. Listen, people, science is not sensitive. Science is not weakened by sunshine. Science is strengthened by sunshine, which didn't work was not science. What didn't work was not science. What failed was authoritarianism posing as science. What failed was treating knowledge dissent as insubordination. These docs don't end the debate. They end the excuse for refusing to have that debate. All right, I'm going to see if I can try to get a couple more of these up that I went through. Okay, let me see which one. That was number 3. That's on that's slide 61. 4, right, that's 1, 2, that's 3, slide 61. So this one is another one. So this is Christopher C. Fonzie, DNI, Monday, letter to DNI, re-COVID origin, urgent concern with enclosures. Given everything that's going on, I'm sure that this is the last thing that you want to deal with. But as we discussed last week, we pulled together some draft points that you could use to call SHHS or DSHHS, or I could use with slight adaptations to call GC or HHS concerning the whistleblower complaint, into a letter that you or potentially you and SHHS could send to accompany the transmission of the complaint to Congress. I've also attached a relevant letter so you have it all in one place. I know your schedule is probably a mess tomorrow and coming days, but if you have a minute after tomorrow morning, stand up. Perhaps we can touch base quickly on the steps. Of course, if that doesn't work or it isn't a good time, I am happy to make. I wanted to call to tell you a whistleblower complaint the acting Inspector General of the Intelligence Community recently brought to my attention. The complaint alleges that there is intelligence reporting contradicting Dr. Fauci's testimony to the Congress that no gain-of-function research occurred or at least wasn't paid for by NIH at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Let me switch the page here. The acting ICIG could not conclude that the intelligence reporting cited by the complaint contradict the relevant testimony, and my understanding based on a conversation my team had with our expert on the topic is that there is substantial disagreement within the scientific community as to what even constitutes gain-of-function research. Nonetheless, given the nature of the complaint, which is classified, I believe we should provide it to the congressional intelligence committees. Before we did so, however, I want to reach out to you to make sure you were aware of the situation and to discuss what steps would be appropriate to take and inform Congress we were taking in light of the complaint. To that end, one idea would be for the acting ICIG to transmit the complaint to HHS Inspector General so that official can also take a look. If we go that route, I would commit to ensuring that the HHS-IG has access to the intelligence necessary to review the complaint. We could also then simultaneously inform Congress of the complaint and our plans for addressing it. And these are all, there's a bunch of more list of them. You'd have to go through on how they, based on that review, it seems like that the whistleblower complaint was referring to exchanges Dr. Fauci had with Senator Paul on May 11th and July 20th. During the May 11th hearing, Dr. Fauci stated that the NIH has not ever and does not fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute. During the July 20 hearing, Senator Paul confronted Dr. Fauci on the prior statement, asking him if he wanted to retract it. Dr. Fauci, of course, stood behind it. Thus, while it is possible, I got to change pages there again because that's all right. Plausible. Thus, while it is possible that Dr. Fauci has spoken to Congress about gain-of-function research at some other point, he testified a number of times. I think the key thing is that what we've seen is consistent with the point that Secretary Becerra made to you, that this is something they've considered and that Dr. Fauci has point he's repeated about the NIH not funding gain-of-function at WIV. We've thus updated the draft letter to note this point and refer the complaint to Secretary Becerra rather than the HHS-IG track changes and clean versions are attached. We've also attached the original letter from the ICIG, so you have everything in their place. Everything keeps going. Now, obviously, we know that came out that the WC NIH had funded gain-of-function research. So that's not, there's no question on that part there. So please, if you're in here, tap that hit that like, subscribe, follow, repost, share button. Let's get that people going, get this more pushed out. Try to get some more people in here and get some more views. Also, I don't know why I don't have, for some reason tonight, I didn't see anything happen on Rumble, but okie dokie. For some reason, Rumble got kicked out tonight for some reason. All right, let me go ahead and get segment 6 because we're already past an hour. What accountability should look like. Now, the question is no longer whether there should be accountability, but what accountability should look like. So here are 9 Constitution-forward thoughts. Accountability is not just punishment after the fact. Constitutionally speaking, accountability means restoring proper roles. Congress legislates and oversees. Agencies enforce the law. Intelligence officials analyze. They do not manage public opinion. Scientists advise. Courts and inspectors general adjudicate wrongdoing. Whistleblowers reveal obscured facts. The public decides. To start with that last step, Congress should establish a timeline. This may seem routine, but it's important. When did federal officials first learn that a lab-related origin was plausible? When did they first learn of risky research taking place at the WIV? When did Dr. Fauci or other NIAID officials first speak to intelligence officials? When were recommendations made? When was Congress briefed? And when were public statements issued or altered? When were objections raised internally? Properly done, a timeline can illustrate whether officials were updating each other in Congress honestly as they learned more or defending a foregone conclusion before the evidence warranted it. Congress should delineate science from spin. One of the worst cognitive habits of the COVID era was conflating scientific uncertainty with communication strategy. If officials said it, some people apparently believe that when the public hears uncertainty, the public will panic or otherwise act badly. Some officials simplified, suppressed, or spoke dogmatically when they should have hedged. Over the long run, that's a toxic legitimacy, and a republic government does not get to treat the public like children. It has to speak truthfully, which includes being truthful that some things are unknown. Require conflict disclosures when experts provide input into intelligence assessments. If an expert has a financial stake, institutional mandate, professional relationship, grant history, or reputational interest that relates to the subject matter of their analysis or advice, that should be disclosed to analysts and policymakers up front. It doesn't mean the expert is wrong or shouldn't provide their opinion. It allows officials to weigh that information appropriately. Conflict disclosure isn't accusing someone of bad faith. It's a tool to protect against it. Now let's define gain of function in risky research. In plain language, gain of function refers to experiments that make viruses more transmissible or dangerous. The fuzzy language around gain of function and what constitutes risky research created both policy and accountability fog. If the public hears officials say gain of function, intelligence or public health officials can still say that the work done didn't meet the technical definition. The agencies use and claim the research didn't qualify. Fine. That may or may not actually be defensible under policies on either end of the government, but that should not be the standard. Congress should plainly define the category and tie funding cutoffs to functional risk. Does the research have the reasonable capacity to increase transmissibility, pathogenicity, host range, immune escape, or pandemic potential? If the answer is yes, admit it clearly. Make sure taxpayer dollars can't hide behind intermediaries. Congress controls the federal purse. If federal dollars supported risky research through intermediaries, pass-through grants, or international partners and institutions, Congress should demand reporting and set conditions. Foreign lab disclosures, biosafety audits, transparency on subgrants, conflict of interest reporting, consequences for willful noncompliance. This is not to say that no scientific research should ever be done. Rather, we should not allow high-risky research funded by taxpayers to be obscured by layers of grant organizations that the public can't follow. Whistleblower protection should be more than just hypothetical. To the extent ODNI's readout accurately describes whistleblower retaliation or intimidation, future intelligence officers will learn the wrong lesson unless some at the government faces consequences for their accusations. No, I didn't get to cover all of those readings and stuff. Like I said, there was just too many pages to go through. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to go through all 800 pages before I got to this podcast or this episode. I might do a updated episode later on required if people ask for it or would like it, and I'll try to put some more of those, cover some more of that paperwork and some more of those letters. If not, let me know, because the government can't urge employees to come forward, then allow managers to intimidate them into silence. Who received the complaints? Who was assigned to handle them? Who else was notified? What happened to the whistleblowers? Were individuals disciplined for retaliation? If not, Congress should know why not. Declassification shouldn't be a moment, but a process. Part of the reason releases like this are so politically combustible is that they're not. The government buries this material for years, then dumps it in public view all at once. Suspicion comes with the release for both sides. A better system would, where appropriate, anonymize people's identities, but require the intelligence community to systematically declassify major public health and national security controversies as they arise. There can be legitimate redactions, and as we saw with the Hunter Biden story, there should be limits on how reporters use such documents. But the starting presumption should be that analytical disputes and policy-pertinent communications become public. If the government wants the public to grant an extraordinary trust during an emergency, it should agree to extraordinary transparency after the fact. Congress should review government platform coordination. The COVID origins debate was never confined to U.S. government agencies. Discussion of pandemic origins affected what could and could not be said online, which claims were designated misinformation, and which accounts were silenced or downgraded. Platforms did this with input from government actors. If those actors or government-funded experts help shape a consensus narrative, that platforms then enforce there are First Amendment adjacent concerns regardless of whether a DMUS order actually existed. Do not underplay how powerful informal pressure can be. Audits public health establishments. If anything marks the pandemic, it was how officials received deference despite massive failures, but what enabled that posture. Was it purely a political environment that punished permanent officials for giving politically inconvenient answers? That's part of it. But we should also ask, did officials who spoke with certainty receive promotions? Were those who acknowledged uncertainty punished or marginalized? Did the media shame officials who refused to pin their hopes on a single vaccine while elevating those who did? Did agencies choose reputation over humility? Democrats will control one chamber of Congress during the next pandemic. Will the same patterns hold then? For those reasons, the last thing I'll say about accountability is that it should not belong to any one party. Republicans will rightly drive a majority of this oversight. Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer defended Fauci and the COVID establishment for far too long. But when we talk about these reforms, we should be thinking about how they apply if a Republican administration tries to game intelligence, cover up disagreements, or concern conflicts during the next bioemergency. One challenge with the document dump is that it can feel like a box of puzzle pieces. So we obviously, we're going up on a minute 14, so I'm going to cut out segment 7 and just go to the, go ahead and go to my closing, because I don't want to be here another 20 minutes. So like I said, I can probably put this into a second or 2 or 3 hour live probably, but I'm going to go ahead and go to closing here, get it ended, and then go from there. So where exactly does all of this leave us? It leaves us with a release we should neither ignore nor exaggerate. It is serious enough to require accountability and confusing enough to require care. The simple version of this story goes like this. Fauci lied. The lab leak was real. Case closed. The useful version is a little harder. Powerful institutions seem to have advanced, defended, and shielded a pandemic origin narrative, while outsiders, whistleblowers, and Congress attempted to obtain clear answers. That isn't just a story about COVID. That is a story about our republic. Expertise is something we value in a constitutional republic, but it doesn't get to rule over us. Intelligence is something we value in our country, but it can't be invoked to silence good faith inquiries. Public health is important, but it doesn't get to sweep conflicts of interest under the rug. Congress is supposed to ask questions. Whistleblowers are supposed to be protected. The public is entitled to know whether or not officials were truthful, whether or not they disclosed conflicts of interest, and whether or not they allowed dissent. The lesson here isn't that every expert was a liar. The lesson is that we cannot allow any class of experts to make themselves unaccountable. Science requires debate. Intelligence requires dissent. Congress requires candor. The public requires access to the record. Without those things, trust isn't earned, it's demanded. If I had to leave you with one line from this episode, I would leave you with: the government does not get to crown science. No kings in the lab coats, no kings in intelligence briefings, no kings leading administrative agencies, and no kings using classification when the people have a right to answers. If this episode was valuable to you and helped you sort the forest from the fireside screams, please take a moment and rate and review No Kings on the Hill on your favorite platform and share this episode with someone who cares about accountability and truth. Your support helps us reach more people and keeps those conversations going. Leave No Kings on the Hill a rating and review and share it with somebody who still believes that the government should provide a real accounting of what happened during COVID. Tell us how you think we're doing, where you think we are spot on, and where you think we have missed the mark. What stories do you want us to cover next? Also, don't forget to check out No Kings on the Hill with drlaw.com. Please click over there and spend some time with us, where you can find all of our social links, past episodes you may have missed, and ways that you can support the show. You can always subscribe for free to access our weekly blog, or you can go ahead and subscribe to one of our 3 paid accesses to get perks, which include the ability to subscriber-only lives, subscriber-only Discord chats, monthly guest appearance chances, and the chance to help choose the next topic that we cover for the podcast. So and nominations to cover the next topic. So please remember, we go live every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern on Rumble, X, and Facebook via the Patriots Prayer Network. What happened with Rumble tonight, I don't know. Additionally, we were on YouTube and Facebook at No Kings on the Hill, on X at Dr. Hill Law 42, and Kick at No Kings on the Hill. As always, we cut through the slogans, we cut through doomer memes, we cut through the political theater, because this republic doesn't survive on hashtags. It survives when we drive toward truth. It survives when we re-engage the law with ordered liberty, with a constitution that actually means what it says. And if tonight's episode did anything useful, I hope it helped to remind you that good policy and constitutional principle have to travel together. Being right about the problem is just half the battle. We have to be right about the solution, and we have to be right about who has the authority to implement that solution. Otherwise, free people keep pulling themselves back from the cliff of reform as a new era of rule by administrative convenience starts to take shape. So keep those emails coming. Keep letting us know what you want us to tackle next. Keep sharing this show with your friends, family, coworkers who you know are thirsty for something more than panic and screaming monkeys on cable news. You grow this with you help us grow with every share that you send our way. And believe me, I do not take that for granted. So until next week, stay informed, stay engaged, stay grounded in our Constitution, and remember, no kings on the hill, only we, the people, and the rule of law. Until next week, see you on the Hill.